All right. It's time to start our What's New. What can we learn about exploration from Starfield? Why do we tell horror stories to each other? Is there such a thing as being too over the top, even for an anime? And what can we learn from the life of Will Wheaton? We're going to be discussing all these things and more today on Systematic Geekology. We are the Priests of the Geeks. I'm going to stop the music from playing again. And there we go. I'm your host, Christian Ashley, and I am, of course, joined by my co-host here, my friend, Kevin Schaeffer. How you doing, Kevin?
Christian, I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm okay, man. This is excellent. We were talking before. This is just a lazy Monday for me. I'm ready to get into stuff. We're going to have a ton of fun here. So we got some really great quality stuff to discuss. So as we do, when this time comes around, we're going to start with our lightning round. And I'm, of course, going to be starting with Ultraman Blazar, which I have been enjoying immensely. It is it's not reinventing the wheel, as it were, but it is also like playing with the old Ultra tropes. Like, I don't know let me ask, how familiar are you with Ultraman before we actually get into that for the lightning round part?
So I know some of the basics. I really haven't done like a deep dive, but it's been an interesting resurgence for that IP in the past few years. I mean, I feel like before the last I don't know 3 or 4 years, most Ultraman fans were like from an older generation, and it was this kind of like other movies or stories that people grew up in, like the Godzilla era, and then it's had an interesting resurgence in the past few years and coming into comics and stuff. So I don't really have a deep connection, but I have friends who do, and I think it's a really cool universe. And so I'm interested. I'm flipping to you. Like, what is your background with Ultraman?
Yeah. Well, I was raised on Ultraman, like with many things, by my dad. He's the one who introduced me to comics and all the movies and almost everything I've watched that wasn't like Disney. That was more my mom. And for Ultraman, I was Godzilla guy first. Watched all the classic movies there. Got into the ones from the 90s as I was growing up. And he got me to Ultraman 2. Love this show. Like, it's everything that appeals to that little child inside of me. That's like, hey, there's a guy in a kooky suit wrestling with a guy in another kooky suit, and you're just going to have fun. Like, sometimes there's a plot, and that's good. But
No, it doesn't get any
I
better
find it
than that.
interesting
Just like
not to focus
the
too much on this
aesthetic.
because this is a lightning round. Yeah,
Sure.
it's one of those things where I, I think we're getting some characterization for the Ultra himself this time. Not to say there's never been some before in past Ultra series. We're dealing with a franchise that's been here for almost beyond 50 years, actually. Like, we're getting to see, like, he may be the last of his kind in this alternate reality we're in. Like, him dealing with some PTSD as well, like hanging out with our host for the season, who is Genta, the leader of our monster fighting squad in, is it Scarred, I think? And the conflict the two of them had, like one trying to be a father, which is also something I don't remember has happened before with our pro tag, who is actually, a 30-year-old man who has a wife and a kid. I'm loving how they're changing that up. Ultraman Blazar has been really great, but I know, even though we did have a discussion last week with James, TJ, and Will, Kevin, we are both going to talk about our feelings on Ahsoka real quick for our part of the lightning round. Kevin, go ahead, take it away.
I will try to keep this brief because I could easily do a whole episode on this. But so I'll just go ahead and say, I have an Ahsoka keychain on my wheelchair, and I got to meet Ashley Eckstein at GalaxyCon last year. One of my all-time favorite characters, and I'll just say I'm loving the show. At the time of recording, last week's episode is just one of the best pieces of Star Wars media. I'd say not just in the Disney era, but of all time. I'll put on both there. It's not just nostalgic, but it adds so much depth to her story, to her relationship with Anakin, opening up more of the world between worlds, which if you've seen Rebels, you know what that is. And I just like being that whole scene and sequences of bringing events and images from the Clone Wars show to live action was done just flawlessly.
Yes.
And I have to give a special shout out to the actor who plays young Ahsoka here. I believe her name is Ariana Greenblatt, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So she's
right.
only she's like a teenager, and she's already been in three of the biggest franchises and of all time, because she was young Gamora in Infinity War. She plays a significant role in the Barbie movie, and then now she's in this. So I'm like, she's having quite the career already at a young age, and could not have been better casted here. But I'm loving Ahsoka. I could go again way more in depth here, but it's just one of those. If you're a fan of Clone Wars and Rebels and the prequel era, it's just a treat, and it really expands upon the story. I'm especially interested in seeing how Ahsoka and Sabine's relationship evolves. And yeah, I just really love last week's episode.
Very nice. Yeah. To keep this short, like, because there's so much I want to say, but we also
Oh
did have the
yes.
whole episode dedicated to it.
Oh yeah.
So to keep it short, I'm really enjoying it. I'm liking what they're doing. That last episode was spectacular. The
Mhm.
transition between Anakin as Anakin and then Anakin as Vader is one of the best shots I've ever seen for Star Wars. I love that so much. Like giving Ahsoka that bit of, oh, you forget the fact she's like 14
Yeah.
dealing with an interstellar war, which is not what she's supposed to be doing. But because of the circumstances in the galaxy, she is now on the battlefield as a young adult. Love that scene. Uh, I can't wait to see where they're going. I have a very bad feeling this is going to end up being our Empire Strikes Back of the television stuff. And that I imagine they're going to reunite with Ezra, but at the cost of letting Thrawn get to regular space to take over the Empire. I'm sure that's not the boldest theory anyone's ever made, but that's where I think we're at.
Oh, I agree. I mean, based on the pacing, I don't think we're going to get a nicely like tied up narrative by the end of the season. It will leave a lot. And I mean, if for your listeners who don't already know, Dave Filoni is still set. I mean, I know the strikes are going on and everything, but the last big announcement they had was he's going to write and direct a feature length movie that will sort of tie in all the elements of like Clone Wars, Rebels, Mandalorian, Ahsoka. So I think that'll be like his heir to the empire, and this is
Mhm.
very much the setup for that. So absolutely, I think it's going to be like we're going to get to see Thrawn, we're going to see Ezra, but it's not going to be all wrapped up by the end of the season. And I don't know if they're going to save the rest of the story for that movie or if they'll do another season of Ahsoka. I'm not sure exactly how it all play out. But yes, I think it is going to be. There's going to be some cliffhangers. There's going to be some, catastrophic results for the galaxy. But I'm very invested and excited to see where it'll go.
Very much so. All right. Well, do you have anything you'd like to add to the lightning round before we head into our episode proper?
I'm good. I think I want to go into our topic. I'm interested in the ones you have listed here too.
Okay. Well, let's get into those. We'll start with my first one. That would be Starfield, which has been the recent Bethesda game that has just come out within the past couple of days. I'm a big Bethesda guy. I got my start with Fallout 3 and Oblivion. I know other people that's sacrilege, but you know what? That's how I ended up there. And I'm loving it. It's not the most engaging game just yet. Its basic premise: humanity has gone to the stars. We've populated different planets. Found alien life yet. We found like what might be traces of them. And there's this whole group that you find yourself a part of. You unearth an artifact as a miner on this one planet that seems to be tied to an alien race. And now you're working with them. They're called Constellation, and their job is they're kind of like freelance explorers. They have that big idealistic goal of like, we've got to go out there and explore and see what else is out there. Then you've got, your basic, typical kind of United Nations like government here. You've got your more not anarchist, but more free, that it's Free Star Collective is their name. They're like more free bending the rules kind of way. And you've also got your Crimson Fleet, which is a bunch of pirates. You got spacers who are a bunch of crazy people out there, not quite Reavers, because they still have their thoughts intact, from Firefly. So, and it's all that working together. I just got through the mission. Heavy spoilers, by the way, for anyone out there, where you lose one of your companions in from Constellation as you're attacked by the alien race or it seems to be they're either the alien race who made them. I don't know yet for sure, or there are other alien races who found it, have kind of like ascended almost to a higher plane of existence, but not totally. And now they don't want you to do the same because they don't think humanity is ready. That's what I think is happening. I'm totally enjoying it. Do you have any experience with Starfield at all, Kevin?
I don't. I'm not really a gamer as much as like I played like back in the day, and then I know there are a lot of accessibility tools for gaming now, but for a while there wasn't as much, and so I kind of drifted off, but I still have friends who are very much like huge, big time gamers, and so this is not one property I'm as familiar with, but nonetheless, it sounds like, I mean, the kind of cosmic sci-fi that I would enjoy, nonetheless. And so I
Yes.
enjoy your descriptions here. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a brand new IP from Bethesda as opposed to Elder
Mhm.
Scrolls and Fallout and all that.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
seems to be something they want to make more games out of, which kills me as a player because that means we're going to wait even longer for Elder Scrolls 6 and even longer for Fallout 5. And I hate how much game development takes so much longer these days, but I'd prefer that to, artists and writers and developers and designers having to work, 80, 100-hour weeks
Right.
as it's been in the past. Like whatever it takes to have them have a stable working relationship to get the game polished and ready on their time,
Mhm.
I'm fine with that. I'm very impatient.
Yeah. You want, I mean, you get, well, just because of the quality of stuff today, you like want it more and more right away. So that's
Yeah.
understandable. But no, this, I mean, I love the aesthetic here of the cover, and like, are there, so as far as story wise and just thematically, what are some of the big takeaways for you for playing this?
One of them that I found, like Todd Howard said, one of the creators of Bethesda, uh, is that this is kind of a NASA punk kind of game. So not a cyberpunk or steampunk or anything like that, like inspired by that goal of exploration, going out
Yeah.
there, finding more. What is our place in the whole of reality? That's actually kind of leans into one of my questions I was going to
Mhm.
ask is that, is there any point in exploring the stars when we have so much to wrestle with on Earth? And I say that in light of the game, is that Earth itself at this point, no one lives there
Mhm.
because there was a great disaster that kind of it was either shifted the magnetic poles or something like that. So like Earth is a barren wasteland.
Mhm.
So that's in their story, but like right now, like you have detractors saying like, why should we be going out there when there's so much we have to deal with here? What are your thoughts on that matter?
It's a really good question. I mean, I think like there's two ways to look at that. As far as on an individual basis and just thinking about, cosmic questions and bigger picture outside, I think it actually helps us understand our own humanity better. And like when we look at our place in the universe, there is, I get what you're saying about the whole, like, yeah, detractor is saying like, why are governments pouring resources into that when there's so much here on Earth? And I think there is some legitimacy to that statement, because like there is, we do want to take care of problems here. But as far as like, no matter how bad things get here, I think it is important that we still have that scientific curiosity, and that's so intrinsic to spiritual. Does that make sense? Like, because,
Yeah.
thinking about these big questions of like where we are and where we fall in the universe, it seems superfluous when you're just trying to get through day to day stuff. But I think it actually helps you understand humanity's place in things and helps you become more empathetic, and just like keeping that wonder alive and that curiosity, I think, is important.
Yeah. Well said. I mean, there are certainly plenty of things that could be solved. Well, or at least done as worked on as best as possible here, because we're never going to get rid of poverty. We're never going to get rid of homelessness or sickness or death or anything like that. But that doesn't mean we don't fight against it. That doesn't mean
Right.
we don't seek to help the people suffering under drug abuse or what have you, or, under, in the midst of sexual trafficking or something like that. But at that same time, like we have been gifted by God with a wondrous planet we got to protect. But at the same time, we're not just here.
Mhm.
There's so much more out there. So, what's the balance between the two? I don't know. I'm not the one
Mhm.
handling the budget, but still, like, we can't deny the fact that we are not just alone, even forgetting the fact of aliens possibly existing. Like, this one planet is not all there is.
Mhm.
God made more than just that for us to see and view. And I think, depending on however things go in the end, like, He may want us to go out there
Mhm.
and see what else He has to offer us.
Mhm.
And I'm all behind that. While at the same time, I don't want to neglect the people who are suffering. So, like, where's the balance? Like, I don't have that answer, but there's got to be a way to balance the two where you're not leaving the people on Earth completely behind while also exploring the stars. And then you get the whole thing of like, well, we're not a united planet. So, who gets to control what out there?
Yeah.
It's not going to be easy. it's a very idealistic kind of tone of you, very Star Trek of like, well, we
Yeah.
eventually we all got together and then we went out there and uh, where no man had gone before, and that's I love that so much. And I think I'm at that part of the story here for Starfield where that idealism is being punished to an
Mhm.
extent because
Mhm.
you went too far. It's kind of like that, almost not quite a Jurassic Park of oh, what's the quote? You didn't bother to think if you should, or I butchered the quote
Yeah,
completely,
something like that.
but
Yeah.
yeah, and like, oh well, we're unchecked because we kept exploring without thinking of the consequences. But at that same time, it's good to be exploring.
Right. And I
So
think
I really
again, the
enjoy that.
reason I say, yeah, and
Go,
the reason I say it like makes you more empathetic is like so often we're caught up, and not even in like other people's, but our own everyday problems and like, and things that ultimately are really petty. And then when we think about the vastness of the universe and all the things out there, I think it helps us to look beyond our own circumstances and our own individual problems and say that like, oh, we're part of a much bigger story, and like
mm,
it's not, like, yeah, we have things we could gripe about, but ultimately there's things that they pale in comparison to, the bigger scope of everything. And that I think in turn makes you more empathetic to the rest of humanity, the rest of the world. Yeah, if that makes sense.
yeah, it kind of almost reminds me. What is it? All Star Superman, where
Mhm.
Lex gets the powers for a little bit, and he realizes,
Mhm.
oh, this is what you see all the time being you. No wonder you're trying to protect us all. No
Yeah,
wonder you're such a hero. It's like,
yeah,
oh, okay, I get that. To see the totality of where we are in time and space and go, oh, well, maybe I should be caring about the things back home.
yeah. Oh, Superman is a great lens for that
Oh,
philosophy and
yes.
everything. Yeah. But
All right.
yeah,
Well,
but this sounds great though. I mean, I may check out some of the gameplay online just to see because like, and also the cover here kind of reminds me of some Jeff Lemire books like Descender and Trillium
mm,
and stuff that are also that kind of like epic space opera. But yeah, this great
yeah.
recommendation here.
Yeah, I do enjoy the game a lot. It's like I said, it's not the deepest thing in the world so
Sure.
far that I've seen. Maybe that changes along the way. Like, there's only so many companions that are actually worth like hanging out with and stuff like that. So I think that's a bit of a downgrade compared to what we got in Fallout 4 and a little bit in Skyrim, but that's okay. Like they're doing their own thing here. I still haven't explored everything like I have for those games. Like how many times have I played them over modded? Uh, too much of my time has been taken away by Bethesda, and they're going to keep doing it to me. But I felt like part of the story is figuring out like that we're not just alone. There is someone else out there. And like I said, I'm still discovering like whether or not they're actually aliens or maybe humans who found some way to get to this. But it seems to me they're aliens. And we've on the show actually had several episodes like what would happen if we experienced alien life? Like I've been on one. We had one before I came on here. But you yourself, as far as I'm aware on these airwaves, have not been asked. So I want to hear your take on it, Kevin. How would you feel should we learn about other intelligent life out there in the cosmos?
Oddly enough, I've had this conversation not just with other geeks, but like even like disability friends and stuff. This is a conversation I've had multiple times. It's a fascinating one to answer because I think of it in two minds. Like, yes, there's the fear of the unknown, and you're like, the immediate thought is like, oh, would they be here to harm us, or would they be, some kind of threat? But and you ultimately can't know if we discover life on other planets like there you don't know. But yeah, I think it was like a friend asked me one time like I can't remember the exact phrasing, if an alien came, would you take the risk and go with them, or like it was sort of like a red pill blue pill question, like a
Yeah.
matrix kind of, or just leave it. No. And like I think I did answer like I would want to go and see what I would like, my curiosity would compel me like, yes, there's still that yeah, I mean it's a huge risk and you don't know, would you come back, would you, but yeah, part of me would really want to. So yeah, it's a hard one to answer because I'm like, it would be fascinating, and I obviously my hope would be that they would, another life force would be more advanced, but in a good way from humanity, and would be there to help and to and something we could learn from them. Sort of like in Arrival, the movie with
Mm,
Amy Adams. Like I really love that movie, and I think I like the more optimistic take there. Obviously,
okay.
there is the possibility of it being like some big classic invasion type thing, but obviously, we wouldn't want that. So yeah, I know that's kind of still leaves it ambiguously,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
would be fascinated in exploring that, and I think it would be really cool if we could build relations with this whole other civilization and species, and they would be mutually beneficial.
Well, you said it was your answer was so ambiguous, but it's such a multifaceted question. Like you have to consider a
Yeah,
lot of things
yeah,
before you say, "Well, I just say yes." Well, like, did you consider if these is an invasion force? Is this a Twilight Zone to serve man kind of
hmm
situation? Or are you going to be in an alien zoo? Or are they just going to dissect you when you come back to their planet? Like you don't know
hmm
that. Well, or could this actually be a race out there that genuinely wants to look after us? I mean, is there such a thing as an unfallen race in the cosmos? Like you get in our space trilogy, C.S. Lewis, that we do see some there.
hmm
Or are they just as fallen as us and they've had to deal and wrestle with sin in their own way, but they just advance faster than us? Like, who knows? And the point being is like they're out there. And
yeah,
if they are. And I think God is a little too creative just to stop with us. That's kind of my personal opinion. Like I have nothing to prove that with outside of, people are seeing something out there. So
mhm,
whatever that is. And in fact,
yeah,
in December, for our friends out there for Friday Night Frights, I will be covering the Betty and Barney Hill UFO encounter. So
nice,
uh, just to get you ready for that, throw that out
nice,
there.
nice.
So as far as rating and reviewing goes, like I haven't
Mhm,
finished the game, but I'm feeling like a high nine right now. Like, unless something, either gets worse at the end or gets better, like that's probably where I'm gonna stay. So
mhm.
enjoying this game. Our next topic, Kevin, of course, is yours, which would be
Yeah,
the Midnight Club, which was that last year?
it was last
Yes, go ahead.
October around. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the Midnight Club is from Mike Flanagan and Leah Fong, and Mike Flanagan. I think I've talked about him before on this show, but he's one of the most prominent horror filmmakers today. He did movies like Oculus, Doctor Sleep, Hush, which is great. And then for the last few years, pretty much every year, he's been releasing either limited series, or in this case, this was meant to be a more of an ongoing, but only went one season. But all these different horror series for Netflix. And so he started with The Haunting of Hill House, then he did Haunting of Bly Manor, then Midnight Mass, which is my favorite
Oh,
still.
love Midnight Mass.
Love Midnight Mass. There's so much to talk about there. But and then the Midnight Club came out last year, and I had watched some of it last year and was really enjoying it, but for whatever reason just fell off. But then recently, since he has one more show coming out, actually, I think it just dropped. I'm going to probably watch it later this week or weekend. But The Fall of the House of Usher just
Uh-huh.
jumped on Netflix. And so that's sort of his last Netflix series before he's going over to Amazon. We were talking about this a little before the recording. But The Midnight Club, again, premiered last year. And I went, it was like on Labor Day weekend. I just watched the whole series because it's 10 episodes. And this is so with all of Mike Flanagan's work, there's a real depth to the characters and to the writing, and it's real. It's that kind of falls into that category of what people call like elevated horror, where it is more character focused and it's trying to say something. And not that there aren't a lot of horror classics that don't, but it's
Yeah.
not your Saw 3 or something like that. Like this is these are very like these are not slashers or and I really, if anything, I think like his work is the kind of stuff that might bring people into horror that aren't traditionally, viewers or readers of that genre. And this one in particular is a great YA introduction, young adult, if you want to kind of like dip your feet into kind of a YA horror vibe. And the premise of this series is it takes place at a private hospice center where these group of terminally ill kids are there, and they all come from different backgrounds, and they're kind of strung together here. And every night at midnight, they gather to tell ghost stories to each other. And the point of view character was going into college right before she got a cancer diagnosis, and of course, upends her life. And so she comes in here, is introduced to the Midnight Club, And all the while, there's this kind of supernatural mystery looming over the facility, and it connects itself to a lot of the stories that the characters tell. And yeah, it's a series I really enjoy. First of all, I want to get your perspective because you said you have seen this one as well.
Yes. Uh, I particularly love this series.
Yeah,
I don't remember all the names of the people. I don't
yeah,
remember all the stories they told. It's been
hmm
that long since I've seen it, but I enjoyed the premise. I enjoyed the aspect of using horror as a way to deal with the realities of their situation.
hmm
I'm a big horror head myself, love the genre. And as a writer, too, like seeing how different writers made horror their own from the perspective of these characters, even though this is, it was originally based on a series of novels, right? By
yes,
John Christopher. Yes.
Christopher Christopher Pike. Yep,
Christopher Pike. I'm thinking of someone else
and
then. Thank you for
yeah,
correcting me.
and not Christopher Pike from Star Trek, but a different guy.
Totally different guy. Hasn't been born
Yeah,
yet.
no, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I love what they're doing there. The whole concept of the Midnight Club, like I was a little iffy when I started the series, but when they
Mm-hmm.
first you see them in that little special place they have with the fire going, telling a horror story, it's like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
in.
Yeah.
Sold. Let's do this.
And also, what you really come to appreciate is that each of the stories they tell, they're not just like, oh, here's a ghost story. Each of them say something about their character. So, for instance, like there's a character named Kevin there, who is like his friends and family view him as like the perfect guy. He's like this nice, like really charismatic dude, and has like sort of has this kind of like golden child personification like thrown at him, like he can't make a mistake, and that in turn puts a lot of pressure on him. So he tells a story about a teenage serial killer that like where like he casts himself as that, and obviously it doesn't happen, but it's a fictional thing that it speaks to his character of he wants to prove to people that he is multi-layered. Obviously, not that he like wants to be a killer, but the fact that he's kind of like tired of this kind of personification, you know, thrown at him and that pressure put on him. So that like that's one. Then there's another who he like all his quote before he tells the story is that he wants to save the world and get the girl. And so he like makes up this big like time travel story in sci-fi and with like the girl he has a crush on. And you know, there's all stories like that. And then there's one who they by far the most intense episode, and they put a discretion at the beginning where it's related. She tells a story that involves suicide and that involves like her going off like with like these kind of like rock and roll hipsters and hitchhikers, and so in all of them tell stories that are personal to them, even though they explore different genres. And that's I think the best part of the show because like at first you're kind of with the other series that Mike Flanagan did. There's an overarching narrative that is the most compelling part. Not that this isn't, like I said, there is this supernatural mystery that's set up from the beginning that the main character Ilanka discovers a former resident, a hospice center, who supposedly cured herself and is still
Mhm.
alive. And so that's part of the mystery. And it is a really interesting part. But again, the individual journeys of these characters and how they learn to grow with each other and explore aspects of themselves, that's by far the most compelling part of the series. And it is so well written, and I really love the character dynamics here. And as far as spiritual themes, like so this is the really interesting thing about Mike Flanagan is he is like an outspoken atheist
Uh-huh.
and like and has you know like it talks about his upbringing in the Catholic Church and then when he secularized. But the really interesting about his stuff, and you see this especially in Midnight Mass and in Midnight Club, is he very much explores religious themes. And I felt that in both of those cases, neither were, oh, screw the church, screw Christians, or anything like that. Like
Yeah.
it's very respectful about like obviously Midnight Mass tackles, you know, religious zealots that are like cult and but on the flip side, there's a wonderful relationship in that series of like the main character and his ex-girlfriend who like he grew up to become an atheist. She was kind of the more rebellious growing up and then is now a Christian. They have this really beautiful, eloquent conversation where they're able to share their views with each other in a respectful manner. And I really like the way he draws that character, like hers, to show that she's not this like you know judgmental, like hypocritical bigot or anything like that. Like she's just this very like genuine person of faith, and he writes her really well. The same thing happens in Midnight Club, where there's one character named Sandra who, like, her faith is a huge part of getting her through her disease journey and coping with the diagnosis. And then on the flip side, like, there's one character who has a lot of angst toward her at the beginning because he's gay and he's been rejected by his mother because of his sexuality, and
Uh-huh.
he in turn blames people like Sandra for that, and it starts off that way, and then they end up having this beautiful reconciliation where they come to understand each other, and it dissolves any kind of like tropes that I feel like other writers might have gone into. If that make it, like they might have like portrayed like her as a villain, and it doesn't do that with any of the characters here. They're every one of these characters are people who are outcasts and thrown into this situation and have to learn how to cope with it and learn from each other. And that the friendship here is what sustains them. And as a lifelong disabled person, I appreciate too the conversations about ableism explored here, and just that kind of like unity here. Like, for instance, the character Kevin, he goes to prom with his girlfriend one night, and he comes back and he's like, yep, they made me prom king and they all told me I was inspirational and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, this is
Mhm.
so like on the nose, like this is like on the nose. This is like so accurate here. So I
Yeah.
love those conversations. But yeah, that's what I really love about Mike Flanagan's writing is that he tackles those sort of otherwise taboo topics that other people might shy away from. And even though he himself is secular, he has a lot of respect for genuine people of faith, and is not afraid to tackle those conversations and explore and ask questions and not make it really one-sided at all. He really shows multiple perspectives, and I think that's especially apparent in this one in Midnight Mass.
Yeah, I really appreciate how all of these teenagers feel like screwed up teenagers,
Hmm.
but they're not it's not like they're making fun of them
Yeah.
or just they're not caricatures. It's like, hey, they are wrestling with some really deep stuff here beyond the fact that they are terminally ill.
Yep.
And they come from very different places.
Hmm.
And seeing we have our Christian, we have our atheist, we have
Hmm.
um, our gay man here. We have
Hmm.
plenty more
Hmm.
characters who like with an incompetent writer, you would have had, oh, well, you're this, therefore you're a bigot, or I'm
Yep.
this, therefore I'm perfect because you're just oppressing me. And
Hmm.
instead of like, hey, let's have an actual conversation about this. This is
Yes.
where I'm coming from. This is where you're coming from. I don't hate you. You don't hate me. We're not going to agree
Hmm.
everything between the two of us, but we're going to have a relationship together.
Hmm.
And that's something I think the world could really learn a lot from. Like, obviously, I have a lot of things that I hold really near and dear to my heart. But if I don't leave room to listen to someone without saying, and chances are I'm never going to change my point of view, but if I don't
Hmm.
listen to them, I'm not really doing a good job of being a neighbor. And I'm called to love my
Hmm.
neighbor as myself. So I would expect someone to listen to what I have to say with respect. So why can't I do the same for them?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that alone makes this a series I would highly recommend for Christians and just anyone with a particular faith or ideology to watch, because exactly that. It just opens rooms for conversations. It has very well drawn out characters that, like you said, they're not cliches or stereotypes put on them. These are all very like beautifully flawed people, and they learn from each other, and it's just and it's not just like, oh, this is like a conversation. It's a very engrossing narrative, and it's excellent filmmaking. And yeah, I really highly recommend it. I was glad I went back and watched it all the way through. But
Heck
yeah,
yeah.
and yeah. So I don't and trying to think of anything else to say that. And yeah, as I mentioned, this one was actually intended to be an ongoing series, and it got canceled. But nonetheless, I still say go ahead and watch it, because it does leave you with a sort of cliffhanger and set up for a potential season two, but it also tells a complete story in this season. I don't think you'll watch it and be like, oh, I like,
Yeah, yeah.
like that was a waste of time. It's very much you get a full story, but also I read something that Mike Flanagan, once it got canceled, he posted like something on Reddit or something where he laid out what they would have done in season two for people who really want to find out what happened next. And because again, there's a big tease like at the end of episode 10. But the main story with these characters, I think you get a lot of good resolution. But so
Yeah.
either way, I think definitely go out and watch it. And now I'm really looking forward to the Fall of House of Usher, which is the again is I think it's out now, so I'll probably watch that this weekend. But as far as this one, I'd give it a high like 8 or 9. Like it's hard to do like numbers. Like there were parts where it slowed down a little bit, and I'm like I kind of like speed up, but nonetheless, it was a great watch as a whole. And again, the acting's phenomenal, the writing is top notch, and I still think Midnight Mass is my favorite of the ones he's done, but this one I really liked as well.
Yeah, rating systems, I love using them, but at the end of the day, they're so subjective. Like,
It's,
what's the
yeah,
difference?
and
Yeah,
I mean that like on numbering, I might change my like tomorrow. So,
yeah,
but suffice it to say, I really enjoyed this one and would highly recommend.
yeah. What's the difference between a 5 out of 5 system, a 10 out of 10 system, 100 out
Yeah,
of 100?
yeah,
Like, well,
yeah,
it's all personal. And for me,
yeah,
I probably rate this near where you are, probably like an 8.5, maybe a
yeah, yeah,
9,
yeah,
depending
yeah.
on how I'm feeling. But yeah, this is well worth it, guys. It is pretty much self-contained, even though there was hope for a second season. Like,
Mhm.
uh, there's plenty to get here. Like, this is for younger viewers too. Just know there are some heavier themes discussed here,
Right,
so it depends on the
right.
maturity of the viewer. I highly recommend go check it out.
Yeah,
Now, next up on our docket, completely different in every way, shape, or form,
do it.
we have Baki Hanma, Son of Ogre
Nice.
season 2. And disclaimer, this is so stupid and I love every second of it. Okay, like okay, this conversation can either last a minute or we could go for 50 minutes after this, depending on where we take it from here. Now, let me ask you, Kevin, do you have any idea what this is?
I don't. I'm very interested, but like I think I've said before, I've dipped like my in anime, but I'm not an expert on it. So more regular animation, but nonetheless, I love the cover here. So go ahead, like tell whatever you want here.
Oh, how to describe Baki. Okay, so it's based off of a manga called Baki the Grappler. There was an anime in the late 90s slash early 2000s which adapted the early parts of the manga. They stopped for a bit. Then Netflix picked it up, and instead of starting from the beginning, kind of started where they left off from that
Mm,
one from the 90s and early 2000s. So if you start with the Netflix stuff, there's going to be some stuff like you're going to go, wait, who are these people? Why do they know each other? Well, that's because they're not going to explain it. But the central premise is that our boy Baki here is a young martial artist, and his dad, Yujiro Hanma, you see there at the very top of that photo, is considered to be the world's strongest creature, not the world's strongest man, the world's strongest creature. Is in like he's beaten every human opponent he's ever come up against. He's beaten a lion and tigers and so much more, an elephant and like all this stuff. This is a series that's kind of the perfect definition of turn your brain off and just watch what's in front of you.
yeah.
Like, not to say there's not anything deeper that's brought up here, but at the end of the day, like, I'm not going to be writing a thesis on Baki Hama anytime soon, you know?
That would be pretty impressive if you could like yeah.
It's possible, but it's one of those things. It's his journey. His dad actually killed Baki's mother early on to kind of embolden him to be like, oh, I want you to be the one to end up beating me because I have no one that I can fight 1-to-1 with. And we finally get, after being teased for episodes, for seasons, that final fight between the two of them. And it's that wondrous Baki way of there's stuff thrown at the screen. There's random characters giving flashbacks to stuff that doesn't matter right now. And there's random characters that are being interviewed after the fact. Oh, at that moment, I knew this was going to be the fight of the century or blah, 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 whatever. And in the midst, you're also having ridiculous martial arts moves that don't exist in the history of the world because the human body can't do what they do in the show. But that's part of the fun, is just to see how it can ridiculously top itself. Like this is kind of a half season. they just dropped with us, the half season before this, they found they found in like the ice or stone or something, a Tyrannosaurus Rex about to kill a caveman, which, by the way, even if you're a creationist, doesn't mean you think that they lived together at the same time in the Jurassic Cretaceous period. But in the world of Baki, humans and dinosaurs lived together millions of years ago and actually killed one another. And they had the whole fight of like every fighter in the world showed up. Who's going to be the biggest, baddest guy to bring out who was the biggest, baddest guy all the way back in the day. And you had Baki finally beat him there. And now Baki and his father are fighting. And just part of it is them, the two of them, like actually having dinner together for the first time as father and son. And that which goes on to them offending one another and leading into this fight and like who can come out on top. Like, I'm not going to explain everything. That's way too much to go over, but
Yeah.
It's so stupid. Every
Well,
single
I mean,
second.
I think it's important to have that kind of entertainment that is just kind of turn your mind off and so ridiculous and it's fun and it's entertaining because it's just yeah. I mean, you're in seminary right now. Like I work
Yeah.
in digital media and columnist and writer and like if everything we watched and read was like deeply philosophical or we're looking for a
Oh
message there, kind
gosh.
of thing, our heads would explode. And I just like and I think it's good to have that balance and to have something like this where it's just good fun entertainment. I mean, like I love Cobra Kai and I love like a lot of B movies and stuff like that that I know I'm not like that I'm not going to get any kind of like deep philosophical message from, and that's totally okay. You need stuff that are just like to have that balance and that you can relax to at the end of the day.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like that's so I'm so grateful for the fact that Joshua lets me do Friday Night Frights because that means there's at least one thing out of the entire month that I can read one or two books on that has nothing to do with any of my seminary work, which I
Yeah,
love doing.
yeah,
But I gotta escape every now and then. Even though some of the
yeah,
books I read for the Friday Night Fright stuff are scholarly, it's a different type,
yeah.
and it's so
Mhm.
much fun. So we kind of brought it up. Like, at what point does a story go from ridiculous but fun to badly written and stupid, in your opinion? And
So
that's an
that's
awkward
tough. It's
question.
like that's tough because I think it's like if it's an inherently B movie, like I mean, I'll be like this is not an insult. This is a plug for my friend Brockton, who like I don't know if you know him, but like yeah, like Brockton specializes in B movies and B comics and stuff like that. Like when you go into his stories, you know what you're getting, and like it's intentionally over the top. And he has a movie called Reptile coming out, which I'm doing a plug for right now, in
Oh, yeah.
October. That the trailer just dropped today, and a bunch of my friends are in it. But like, so there's something like that, and then you think of something like I don't know, like an MCU movie or something like that, where it's not meant to be a B movie. It's still meant to be popcorn entertainment, but like you still want it to be well written and you want it to like
Yeah.
make sense. And so I think there is a distinction there. Like I know that's a like blurred line, but does that make sense? Where it's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm okay with stuff where it's meant to be ridiculously over the top, and that's the point. And you are going in there for like expecting B movie effects, and it's this own world of its own. And then something like where if it's a mainstream and it's just like lazy writing, like I think
Yeah,
there
yeah.
is a distinguishment. It's a distinguished there. So that's more where I find it. So I mean, looking at the poster for this right here, yeah, I'm expecting this to be ridiculous and over the top, and I love it.
Okay.
So I know I don't know if that quite answers it. It's a hard.
That's fair.
There's a
It's a
very
wide
like
question.
ambiguous line there, but yeah, yeah,
Yeah. To put things in frame of reference and to spoil my rating and reviewing,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
my favorite anime of all time is called Legend of the Galactic Heroes, and I rate that a 10 out of 10. It is a wonderful story of humanity going to the stars, but yet still like the cyclical nature of, empires and democratic nations and what humanity does to each other and fighting in war and how that never ends no matter where you go. I rate that a 10 out of 10. I also rate Baki Hanma, Baki the Grappler as a whole 10 out of 10 for very different
Yeah.
reasons.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
brings me pleasure in a different way.
Yeah.
It's that point. I think after a point, the author realized the ridiculousness of what he was writing
Hmm.
and decided to embrace it rather than being like, oh, that just happened, or something like that. It's like, no, you have the characters comment on the ridiculousness, but they commenting on it as part of the ridiculousness itself.
Yeah.
While you're watching stupid things that are inhuman, impossible of being done feat wise by regular people on screen, and you're like, well, it's just happening right now, I'm accepting it. Versus something that's like, it's like a that would try to like shallow parody this, be the way to describe that of, oh, well, I'm going to use my technique, I use my technique and I beat you, and that be the line. Versus like, something funny, you could have a witty line in that area. I'm not developing dialogue on screen right now, but to show your appreciation for what you're doing. Like, shoot, I love talking about the thing I'm parodying right now. I love the thing that I'm actually writing right now. And I get a great sense of love and care from something that it's not scholarly, not one bit.
Yeah.
But it's still fun. So I think that's, to me, it's like, who is taking care of the story makes something good, like, as opposed to something like The Room. Like, The Room is good not because Tony Wiseau, or however you say his last name,
Tommy was out. Yeah.
Tommy, Tommy Wiseau is a competent film director. It's because he thinks he is.
That's it's the greatest thing that makes that film so iconic, because he thought he was making a Scorsese masterpiece when he went to that. And, it's the like Citizen Kane of bad movies, but in turn has become something so monumental. So that's a whole nother thing there. But yeah.
I think it's how you care about it as a writer versus how, like, you think you're an intellectual. That's what keeps something from being ridiculous but fun to badly written and stupid. Like, the Room is badly written and stupid, but because of the circumstances behind it, it becomes ridiculous but fun. Baki Hanma is written, it's not badly written, but it's written in a way that, like, you wouldn't expect from a story, but that makes it ridiculous but fun. So that's why I'm at there. You have anything you just want to add before we go to our next question?
Yeah, I think it's very much a specific universe, and you're going to look at it differently and rate differently than you would something that is more scholarly or philosophical or art house or whatever.
Well, to go to a scholarly question about Baki, one of the themes in this show is the father-son relationship between Baki and Yujiro. And you have this absolute monster of a man who murdered the guy's mother in front of him, and yet he desires a relationship with him. Like, who is this man that's been out of my life, that is the strongest creature on this planet, that he has no one else he can relate to? And he wants me to be that person to relate to him. That complicated feeling of, I don't like how this happened, but at the same time, he's still a man, he's still a person. And it's not quite a full redemption arc for Yujiro along the way, but he gets more humanized as time goes on. He's not just some card carrying villain who just kills people for the sake of it. Like, he actually protects and defends people who are in the midst of war, and like stops refugees from being slaughtered. Not because he cares about them, but because he doesn't like people bullying other people. And it's that weird kind of blue and orange morality that he has. So, like, my question to you, Kevin, like, what are the limits of writing a character going through redemption? Like, at what point do we go, I don't buy it?
That's interesting, because, like, well, oddly enough, this kind of like provides a segue into my final topic here. I'll get to in a sec, because there is a heavy son and parent relationship. But that's a good question. Like, because you don't want it to become cliche if you're trying to write a redemption of something like that, where there is clear offense and there's clear baggage and horror there. You want to make the redemption natural, and so I think it has to be treated very carefully, and you have to really look at it from multiple layers. That is interesting you brought up. So, see, you did bring up a really philosophical thing from this, that you said it was just going to be like, totally ridiculous. But now you're stumping me with a really good question here. But I just think, like, you do, if you're writing something like that in fiction, you have to really look at both sides, and, like you said, try to humanize even a horrible character, and look at, okay, does the other person still see the humanity in them and want to have that redemption? And so it's never going to be the same in any one relationship. You have to look at it individually and look at the circumstances and look at what connects them together. and it's all the harder when it's like a father son or any kind of parent child relationship there,
Yeah.
and yeah, so it's I mean
Uh,
like there I mean I
Go ahead.
I think the most I mean it doesn't end up being redemptive. Well, does in a way, but I'm thinking the best example of this is Zuko and Fire
Mm,
Lord in Last Airbender, because in that one, yeah, they don't like Zuko does not, he realizes like he spent so much time trying to please his father and gain his father's love when all along he realizes no, his father is a monster and his true father figure is Iroh. And instead, he finds redemption there and he finds redemption with himself. And so it's kind of a flip there, but that is one of the best, just beautifully drawn out relationship that plays out over 3 seasons. And you're constantly thinking, oh, is he going to, turn away? Is he going to become his father's successor? Like, is this back and forth? And it's such a well drawn out. If you've never seen Last Airbender, I cannot recommend it enough for
oh,
just for
great
that
show.
relationship alone. Yeah.
Yeah, we just recorded our season 2 overview episode, uh, and season 1 dropped not too long ago. I
Mm-hmm.
love that series. Now that those
So good.
episodes I was supposed to be on, I invited myself just because I want to talk about this show. I love
It's
Avatar,
so good.
but
Yeah.
oh yeah, but and Zuko's a great example of a redemptive
Mm-hmm.
arc in a series. I think as far as a black and white interpretation of redemption of someone coming to the realization I'm a terrible person, I need to turn things around, and even get into Christian context of God forgive me for what I've done, take me, I'm yours. Like Yujiro Hanma is never going to do that for the series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously this is a Japanese production. I quoted all the time, it's like less than 2% of the population are Christian. That's not going to be the context you're going to get for redemption. But as far as this story is concerned, that he has earned redemption to an extent in his own way of this is his way of seeking reconciliation with his son. It's like the only way they can understand each other in the way this world works is through fighting one another, because he himself is like the strongest creature on earth. Like that's no one can beat him. He has no one on his level. It's not like he's some brute. Like he's actually very intelligent. And he's in his own way very caring. But at the same time, like he's plucked people's eyes out after he's beaten them. He's killed people that didn't deserve it, and including Baki's own mother. So it's the sense of he does want a relationship. So that's what makes something good. It's like one desiring a relationship with his son. Yeah, sure. Every son wants that from his father. Every father should want that from their son. And he gets it at the end of the series in its own Baki way. So I
Mm-hmm.
think the limits for this are. Hey, did you watch Steven Universe?
No, I need to. I know it's great, but like, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, to not spoil things for you, there's a segment that some people take a lot of offense on. I'm not one of them. And they say there are these kind of overlord figures in Steven Universe that have done a lot of harm, not only to the earth, but to their own people. And yet Steven kind of forgives them at the end. It's like, I agree he should, but they kind of argue it's done too easily. Like they
Mm-hmm.
haven't shown us that they have earned that redemption. But, well,
Okay.
at the end of the day, no one's earned redemption.
Yeah.
So that's a very human way of looking at things.
Mm-hmm.
It's very you hurt me, therefore you're gonna have to work your way back into my good graces
Mm-hmm.
versus what we're actually shown.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it depends on how you're writing it. And I think in that particular Steven Universe situation, it's done well enough. It's not perfect, but it's done well enough. And as far as Baki is concerned, it's actually done pretty well too. But we're also going on pretty long, and I can already hear Joshua grinding his teeth. So, Kevin, as I said, this is a 10 out of 10 for me. This is a dumb series. It's a stupid series. I love every single second of it. Go watch Baki from the beginning, the 90s, 2000s anime, and then watch the Netflix stuff, and then read the manga after that, because they're going to have to adapt that too. So, Kevin, take us away for our next topic, which is still just a geek, an annotated memoir from Will Wheaton.
Okay, and yes, for Josh's sake, I will try to keep this brief, but hopefully not too much editing. But we'll see. But yeah, I know this is a little bit different from what we usually talk about. It's not a comic or show or movie, but this is a memoir by Will Wheaton, who you may know from Star Trek: Next Generation as Wesley Crusher, Stand by Me, one of my all-time favorite movies. And then also he plays an evil version of himself on Big Bang Theory. So he's a long time recognizable figure in pop culture. But with this book, so in the early 2000s, he published a book called Just a Geek. And you can see, like, on this cover, he's holding a copy of that. And this was written like years after he left Star Trek, and he was emerging as a writer, and he published this memoir. What this book is called Still Just a Geek was released last year, and it is he uses the original text of Just a Geek and does a thorough annotation of it, and so he has the text there, and he makes notes throughout it, because he's not only writing about what's changed in his personal life since the time of Just a Geek was written. He's talking about how his entire perspective has changed on a number of things, and so a lot of it is critiquing his own writing, and he's like, God, that joke is
Ooh.
terrible, or this is like cringy and offensive, and I hate it, or beyond. And there are other layers to it of one of the biggest themes of this book, and why I said, oh, this is kind of a segue. This book is a lot about his relationship with his parents, which unfortunately is not good at all. He grew up in a very emotionally and physically abusive household, and it was a generational thing, and he had a number of unresolved and untreated mental health struggles that his parents really never helped him address. And so he is very unapologetically honest about that in this book. And
Mhm.
I mean, he opens saying, like, I don't have a relationship with my parents anymore. Unfortunately, he tried to mend things, and they weren't receptive. And this is all his perspective here, but he's very honest and forthcoming about that aspect of his life and how it. But the biggest thing is that he never really wanted to be a famous actor growing up. He was kind of like forced into that by his parents, and it took him a long time to realize that he wanted to be a writer. And so he writes about that, and a lot about the identity crisis he went through, and for a long time, like, he was punishing himself for leaving Star Trek, and then it took him years to realize that that was actually the right move, because as much as he loved, like, his Star Trek family on the show and being a part of it, again, he didn't want to be a rich and famous actor. He wanted to do other things, and and it took him a long time for him to realize his passion for writing and all these other things. So it's actually, I mean, even you look at the cover of this book and you think, oh, this is going to be a cool, like, pop culture memoir, be some fun stuff in here. And there is a lot of fun stuff. I mean, he has essays on gaming and, comics and geek culture that are really fun, but it's also a very stimulating and really heavy read at times, because it does address mental health and suicide and all these, really heavy topics that I think going in, I think he wanted to explore, not just for his own catharsis, but to help others who may be in that situation, whether it's in people in a toxic relationship, or people who don't really know who they are, and or they struggle with anxiety and depression. And so he puts all of that on the table, and yeah, and like I said, the way it's written is, so you have the text of Just a Geek there, and all the annotated notes are throughout the book. So if you're reading it in print, you just have the notes there on each page. So it's a lot, because you'll, like, read a passage, and then there'll be a little icon there directing you to an annotated note. Then you go and read that, and then you go back to the regular text. And so it could be, like, that's why it's a good book to, like, spend a good week with, or take your time, because you really want to absorb everything. And then there's also additional essays that weren't in the original text added in the last, like, 100, 200 pages, whatever. And so it was I mean, this is one like Midnight Club, I was like, that opens up a lot of conversations and topics, both spiritually, mentally, emotionally, that are really fascinating. It helps you understand someone, like, again, a guy who, I think my first introduction to Will Wheaton was, I don't know if you remember the series Falling Skies. It was, I think,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. He hosted the after show to that, and that was like before I watched Star Trek, but I was watching that show. And so, like, I was first introduced him through that. And so then, like, Big Bang Theory, and then Star Trek and everything else. And so, like, again, I just knew him as this, like, cool pop culture guy. And he has established, a life for himself now, that where, like, he loves his family, and he's in a really good place now, but it was a long journey to get there. And so this is a really epic journey, reading this book, and, seeing the ins and outs of his career, but in his personal life and how those coalesced. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I definitely recommend. You don't even have to be really immersed in any of his properties. Like if you don't even have to be a Star Trek fan or anything like that to get an idea. He lays out any information that you need. But it is, if you're a fan of his work in general, I highly recommend it. And I'm really excited to see what he's going to do next, because he has written some fiction and comics, and so this is, I think, going to be the most personal thing he'll ever do. I could be wrong if he does something again later, but this is a really powerful book to explore. And as someone who reads a lot of memoirs, this is one that I would put pretty high up there.
Okay. Yeah. When you described this book, the thing that really came to me was that whole he's writing over what he wrote before.
Yeah.
I love that so much. I think maybe that's with anyone creative, is that sense of I've released something out
Hmm.
into the ether, people can see it, and all you can see are the things you missed or that you should have added in.
Hmm.
And I am there completely like, I should have said this. Oh, now that I'm older, well, I should have worded it like this.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's like I wish I could just edit everyone's book at the same time so things would change. It's like I forgot a comma there. I spelled this word wrong. I used the wrong there. And it's infuriating because you think, well, now there's nothing I can do about it. But you just have to accept reality sometimes. And that's one of the things he did. From what you're telling me about the
Hmm.
book is
Hmm.
that, yeah,
Hmm.
this is who I was then. This is what
Hmm.
I was wrestling with then. But now I can look back at this when I'm older and edit this book. And
Yeah.
the idea that you can do to something you've already published, as someone who's published several books, that sounds amazing. And Will Wheaton's story himself, I haven't followed everything that he's done.
Hmm.
Obviously, I've seen him on Star Trek. I've seen him Stand By Me.
Hmm.
He was on the Guild, if I remember
Yep. Uh-huh.
correctly.
Yep.
Yeah. And the Big Bang Theory episodes that he's been on, I've seen a couple of those.
Yeah.
But yeah, to actually get the story behind the man, where he was, and the stories you're telling me, this sounds like a really great and fun book.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you have anything you wanna add to that?
No, I just say, like, as a writer as well, it's so hard to look back at stuff you've written. Like, much like, I mean, for me, like, I mean, I've been writing my column for Estimated Today for a little over 6 years, and I cringe at like early ones. I'm like, where it's not even so much the like content itself, but just like, oh, that could have been worded so much better. But here, it's like not only he's looking at the writing style, but all the things where he's just changed so much, and even like jokes he made that he's like, ah, that is so cringy, and so it's a brave feat to be able to look that in depth and that retrospectively at something
Yeah.
you've written and put out in the world, and to confront it and now give your own perspective 20 years later. That is really bold. And yeah, I don't know that I would be brave enough to do that.
Alright, well, as far as ratings go for this, how do you feel? Where do you think it's at for you?
I would put it really high. I mean, like maybe 9.5 something. And I mean, like, I mean, there's parts where it gets like, feel like, okay, I feel like I already read this, but it's, I mean, it's very eloquent, and it is so just honest and raw. And I really love that about it. And that, again, he's not writing for any so much like validation as he is to, get this story out and help others who may be struggling in maybe there's not the exact same scenario, just to be struggling with identity and mental health struggles, and trying to provide hope for people out there. I really appreciate that genuineness, and having seen him in interviews since the book came out, yeah, I just really appreciate his character. He's one I would love to meet at a con one day and get my copy signed.
Excellent. Alright. Well, thank you all for listening. This has been an extremely fun episode. Like, when Kevin and I get on, we just have fun, just talking
Great.
about the stuff we love. I enjoy doing it with them. Which of these topics, Kevin, do you think would be your top recommendation?
It's really tough. I think I'll leave it at the Will Wheaton book, but Midnight Club is very. I mean, both of
Oh,
those I had to recommend. I mean, because you got a book and a TV show recommendation, two very different, but also hopefully that will inspire conversation, and that you'll come away with something.
that's a good one. I want to recommend like all four of these, but I don't know if I can, in good faith, justify someone watch Baki as their first anime. So I'm going to say no to that one. I think you need to ease yourself in before you start getting into the ridiculousness that is Baki. Starfield, I'm not sure if I can recommend totally yet because I haven't finished the game. I do enjoy it. I think I'll go with Midnight Club. That was a really good one.
Nice.
I enjoyed the discussion we had there for that. So yeah, if you have the chance, you could boot up Netflix, watch the Midnight Club, and also watch Midnight Mass, which I also would say is my favorite that he's done.
Mhm.
That burning scene on the boat in the middle of the ocean alone
So
is worth
good.
the price of
So
admission.
good.
Yeah, along the way, we should definitely do an episode on Midnight Mass. I'd be
I would be
all for
down.
that one.
Yeah.
All
Yep.
right. So, listeners, what is your favorite out of the things that we recommended that you guys watch and what's news today? Or do you just prefer the fact that we went on longer than we should and you enjoy hearing the sound of the weeping and gnashing of Joshua as he's in the midst of despair? Like, I know that brings me life sometimes as much as I love him. So, thank you, Joshua, for being a good sport as always, for being the butt of the joke. We do really appreciate everything you do. As far as you guys listeners, please just check us out. You can see this on YouTube. We have this on the podcast as well. If you have the chance, just check us out on Patreon. Just send a couple bucks our way just to help keep the lights on here, get things working and flowing, even increase our chances of going to cons as Systematic Ecology to reach out to people. We want to meet you out in the wild of the con field. So just let us know where do you want us to show up to. We'd be more than happy to do that. But remember, we are all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.